Welcome back. Another episode of the pod. A lot of NFL talk today. We got some moves. DeAndre Hopkins to the Titans. We didn't cover that yet. We're late on everything. This is one of them. But we're not late on the Denzel Mims trade. We'll talk about that because I think it's a really exciting news for the Lions. We'll wait to see what Corsian's thoughts are on it and what it means for the Jets as well. But continuing on to our summer series, two more divisions to go. This one's the AFC North. It should be interesting to discuss which of these teams are making it to the playoffs, which ones could contend for the championship. This is a very physical and exciting division. So, I'm going to roll the intro and let's get into it. All right, I see the live button, so we're on. Corsian, see you got the Browns jersey going. How you doing, and whose jersey is that?
Doing good right now. So right now, this is a Odell jersey from back in his days with the Browns. Obviously he's not there, but he had a couple good years in Cleveland, and I got this jersey for mad cheap while he was still on the team. So I was like, why not? It was like $20 or something, but
20
um,
bucks? Dude, that's a steal.
yeah, because I think it was they had switched their like the jersey like design or whatever, and then I think there's speculation on Odell getting traded, and so his even though he was still on the team, these jerseys were like 20, maybe $30 on NFL Shop or something like that, and I was like, I like Odell. He's a fun player to watch. Why not? And so and so I got this jersey.
Yeah, dude, he's one of my favorite players ever since I've seen like the catch from the wide receiver
Hmm.
position, just from the talent. He could do everything. That reminds me, like maybe I should try and get a Damian Lillard jersey now before he gets traded, and
Honestly.
keep that Portland zero. That would be
Hmm.
amazing if I can cop that. But welcome back, guys. You hope you enjoyed Sunday's episode. We were a little bit late on that due to recording issues, but we kind of have a double episode week this week because of that. So double the goods for you guys. We covered two divisions. Last week we covered the NFC East. Um, Rip Commanders fans, sorry, it's just the brutal schedule, but hopefully this is a lot better with the AFC North. Very competitive division, very exciting to talk about what's going on and how we think each team will do. It's always an entertaining division, but before we get into that, we have two important pieces of news. I was about to say two NFL trades, but technically DeAndre Hopkins was released and he was deciding between the New England Patriots or the Tennessee Titans. So he ended up wanting to sign with the Titans. So Corsan, now that we know that, and we've already covered the Tennessee Titans, we can't go back and like
Hmm.
edit everything. What do you think of them now that they added Hopkins?
Well, I feel like it's pretty clear to see that they still believe they have that window to, win a championship. I mean, Hopkins, I guess, thinks so as well. I mean, just with the fact that he did sign with the Titans of all teams to sign with. But I mean, yes, there's like holes, and maybe it's not like the best roster to technically have signed with, but there's still a lot of good pieces on both that offense and defense that I think give them, ample opportunity to compete in their division. I still think that the Jaguars run away with the division title there, but I do think that the Titans probably could, in some of those games that we were kind of 50-50 on, I think I could have them winning a little bit more of those games than at least what I did initially. And I think this is great for, I mean, just the development of Chig, development of Traylon Burks, just because, they're young players and now they're getting a veteran presence that literally can dominate just the whole entire defense on his own. And so I think that it's a really good move for the Titans. I'm sure Titans fans are pretty happy. Hopefully, it's not another Julio AJ Brown situation, but I think it'll be a little bit better than that.
Yeah, you reminded me of what I heard from Rabel's comment about like Julio Jones. Like he didn't reference Julio Jones, but you could tell like he was talking about him when he was comparing that move to DeAndre Hopkins. So I found
Hmm.
that very interesting. I'm like, oh wow, okay, but I like this move. I
Hmm.
really like this move. I think most people who saw this move would agree this is a net like positive for the Titans.
Hmm.
If you look at their schedule, like with games, like maybe we're questioning like some of the AFC East team, AFC East teams for sure, but more specifically, like when they go against like Atlanta, Pittsburgh, obviously Tampa Bay and Carolina, those are winnable games before that. But when you're talking about like the Dolphins and the Seahawks and like the Texans, like around those areas, like now you feel a lot more confident about picking the Titans to win those matchups because of how this roster is shaped around. And I know, like me personally, going for the schedule, I like to look at the quarterback play and say like, who are like the top 10 quarterbacks, top five. They're probably going to win most of the games, and you'll see that philosophy play out with this division and the AFC North ever covered. But when a team doesn't have that, how do they build their roster? And I love what you said about Okonkwo and Burks itself, because if you're thinking about it from a fantasy perspective, like a lot of people are like not as high on them anymore. And I
Mhm.
don't agree with that philosophy, because if you think about spacing and what Hopkins can do like best, it's on the boundary. It's like those dig routes. It's kind of like he can also stretch the field as well, and he could really like snag any ball within like a 2 mile radius. It seems like with the way his arms are, and having that presence is only going to help them. Like
Mhm.
Traylon Burks, you could already tell he has the right attitude about approaching NFL practices
Mhm.
and like what it means to be an NFL professional now. I think there was a story like Vrabel wanted him like at practice immediately, and like there were consequences if you miss practice like that. And something happened where Burks couldn't make the commercial flights. So then he decided, okay, I got to charter a plane to make it. Like making those decisions and taking responsibility, like you would think that's kind of like in the norm, but it's important. And now that he knows that, and Okonkwo, same thing. He flashed, like he was basically the number one option when the weapons were barren and Derrick Henry was going through injuries.
Mhm.
But Derrick Henry's not going anywhere. Okonkwo's up and coming. Burks is up and coming. We still have to see Kyle Phillips. Like I think
Mhm.
this is a well-rounded offense now that you add Hopkins. That's how well
Mhm.
I think the needle moves. I think it's a great move for them. They're it's definitely in a win now mode, and
Mhm.
like Hopkins is one of those receivers where he will take a team that's like 500 and then push them to the playoffs.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think this move also shows just that they are willing to, let Levis sit back and develop because, you don't sign a superstar receiver to a 2-year deal uh, to have your developing quarterback to try to figure out the ropes of the NFL. And so, they see, I guess, with this move, they really do seem committed with Tannehill. They, they think that Tannehill can repeat, performances of the past couple of years. Obviously, I feel like last year, just injuries kind of tore the team apart, which was unfortunate. I mean, like Burks, I know was had his little runs of injuries. Tannehill had his runs of injuries. Henry had his runs of injuries. I know a couple of their defensive key players had their runs with injuries, and so um, obviously we can't predict injuries, but I think that this team will likely be healthier this year than they will be last year, and so um, yeah, I'm excited to kind of see how I guess the things turn out because now we have another team in the AFC that can compete for another playoff spot, despite how saturated it is with playoff contenders right now. And so, just another team to add to my list of. I guess I got to watch these guys too now. And so,
Hey,
yeah.
you're making it sound like a bad thing. I'm excited. I want to see who makes it out of the AFC. This is going to be like interesting. I love what you said about Tannehill
Mhm.
because I think especially like mostly gearing this towards fantasy because it kind of like gives you an impression on what the
Mhm.
outlook of the player is going to be like. Like he's going like the 30th quarterback or something like from like the few drafts I did, and I'm just like, with this move, this is like really good. Because if you
Mhm.
think about when Tannehill like first burst on the scene with the Titans, it was like with a similarly constructed roster. Like his
Mhm.
number one receiver was AJ Brown, his number two receiver was Corey Davis, and then you had Jonnu Smith when he went off for like crazy amount of touchdowns,
Mhm.
and Derrick Henry still. Like you gotta like I think the weapons he has now are better. Like if Hopkins doesn't face a drop off in production, or even if he's just a wide receiver too,
Mhm.
and Burks takes up that number one role for some reason that we can't predict. Like, I think this is the best cast of weapons he's had since he had really good years in Miami with Jarvis Landry and those guys. Like,
Mhm.
I I really think the Hopkins, Burks, Okonkwo, and Derrick Henry are the best skill possessions Tannehill's had in his tenure with the Titans. And I would not be surprised if he throws for like 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. Like he's kind of like that 14th round QB that people don't want to take because, oh, wait, I want the Jalen Hurts. I want like the Justin Fields instead of like building like the other parts of your roster and then like striking low on age-old quarterback. He's 32 plus. Like he's not going to do jack for me. Like I think Tannehill's that perfect quarterback that can like produce for you and like get you like enough numbers like from fantasy perspective, and also keep the offense humming so Derrick Henry can just go ballistic.
Hmm. Yeah, and like I feel like people dog Tannehill we're talking a lot about Tannehill right now, but I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people dog Tannehill, saying that the only reason he's good is because of Derrick Henry. But I always like to mention about how Derrick Henry was playing back when he had Mariota as his quarterback. I feel like no one really cared about who Derrick Henry was. Like, yeah, he was a strong power back kind of guy, but it was like I remember it's like that season that they switched. It was like I don't know. I think it was the game that they actually switched to. Tannehill was against the Broncos, and at first, like Mariota, he was playing pretty awful as he was that season, just happened to be. And then they switched to Tannehill just midway through that game, I believe, and then he just started connecting with all the receivers pretty quick. And all of a sudden, I'm like, dang it, the Broncos may not even win this game right now. And so I am pretty sure they won, but like, I feel like I don't know exactly what it was, but I think just Tannehill, I guess, better passing ability was able to kind of open up Derrick Henry's game, and they've really helped each other, complementing each other's game. Even though Tannehill probably has benefited more from the overall relationship than Henry has, but yeah, I'm a fan of Tannehill.
Yeah, I think it's more because like look at what Hopkins does for everybody else around him. Like he's kind of like that force multiplier, just as Derrick Henry is a force multiplier for like Tannehill and
Hmm.
the other skill positions around him. I think like because Hopkins is now the number one receiver and like people are gonna like lock in on him from the defensive side of the ball. Like this is just gonna open up things so like Tannehill can like properly go for his reads to the other targets that are can be just as dangerous as secondary options. And oh yeah, you still have Derrick Henry too. I think like you can call like any play right now and get something out of it because of this move. Because like the defense has to worry about Hopkins, not really like worried to stop the run as much now. Like they kind of had to play that cat and mouse game and say like, do we blitz and leave Hopkins one on one? Do we play zone and like gear our zone towards Hopkins and then like open up Burks one on one or like Chig like past the linebackers? But because like we're worried about Derrick Henry, it opens up like all these can of worms now where like the Titans can be complementary and still compete with anybody.
Hmm.
Great move for them.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, great start to the show. Very important news, but underrated piece of news that I want to talk about and I think is important is Denzel Mims. Like I've been talking about it when we were discussing the Jets and like constantly thinking, okay, I think if he has a secondary landing spot, he can really show how talented he is and be a starting contributor, if not a number one wide receiver. I This is lofty, but I think he is an approximation of DeAndre Hopkins based on what you see he can do on the field, and he's only 25 still, and he still has all the skills and attributes you want out of him. Like right now, like Jameson Williams, he's got suspended for 6 games, and the Lions make this move. I think the compensation, if I have it with me, um, so the Jets are trading a conditional seventh round pick to the Lions, and the Lions will send back a conditional 6th round pick. I think the conditional aspect of it is Mims has to make the 53-man roster, and then the Lions will send their pick. If not, they'll just cut him. So then like it's just like, oh, why would the Lions send a 6th round pick if they're just going to cut him anyway? So like
Hmm.
they put like those conditionals on the table. But going through all that, what do you think this means for the Lions offense, particularly because Jameson Williams is suspended and now Mims has an opportunity to make the roster?
Yeah, I do think that Mims is still somewhat buried in this depth chart. Um, I feel like because I mean you have I mean, Williams is suspended, which will give him some more opportunity. But I mean, St. Brown is still there. Amon St. Brown. Marvin Jones is with the team now, and I'm pretty confident that he could. Out of the looking at the roster, there's a pretty good shot. I think he at least opens up the season as like the number two guy. And then we've seen, I mean, Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond play, in their stints, and I think that they played relatively well in terms of, I guess, where they are listed on this depth chart. And so I think um, it'll take quite a lot for Mims to really surpass a lot of these guys in the depth chart. And you only have until Jameson Williams comes back from his suspension to really make a name for himself, and that's when you'll have the most opportunity. But yeah, I do like the fact that he was traded. I think I do hope that a new scenery will, open up more opportunities for him, and uh, just I guess I'll help elevate and boost his game. But um, yeah, it's interesting because again, not a lot of draft capital is like put into this trade as well, which makes me think that it's not like it's like it wasn't a high priority, I guess, for the Lions to be making this trade in the first place, considering it's sixth, seventh round type pick, which I think he's probably better than. But again, that's they're valuing him lower than or around that sixth, seventh range, which is I guess the one concern I'd have for him being or getting valuable reps.
Yeah, and it's definitely a low risk move, and I love these types of deals just from a
Hmm.
team building perspective. I think it should be done more often,
Hmm.
especially like with cast offs. Like Elijah Moore was unhappy, Denzel Mims was obviously unhappy. In my opinion, every time he was on the Jets and he was starting at wide receiver, he did nothing to suggest that he should be on the bench. Like he should have
Hmm.
been starting wide receivers on their teams, and like to the Jets' point, like they just had a lot of young talent that were really good. Like and then Corey Davis, like you're not going to take him off the field. Um, I don't know why they're valuing Al Nassard over Denzel Mims. Personally, I wouldn't, or McCole Hardman, but that's the route they want to go in. They fit the scheme, so I understand it. But some players like transcend the scheme, and I think Denzel Mims can definitely be one of those guys. I think it's a great move for them. Like thinking about Marvin Jones, like he's not a long term like solution to their problems. And even if he's starting, I think he could still produce. Like he's
Hmm.
capable of like 700, 800 yards. Marvin Jones, Denzel Mims, the same thing. But I think this is a situation where I'm looking at their depth chart and like who they're carrying as receivers right now. Even if Khalif Raymond stays on the roster, I can see them carrying 6 wide receivers on their team, where it just consists of Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, Mims, and Marvin Jones. I could totally see that scenario playing out. Um, and so I'm not too worried about that. Like it's more like can Denzel Mims prove he can be that sixth receiver at worst, or is it
Hmm.
not even worth it where they cut him and then not lose anything because of it? So it's just a matter that like here you have a new opportunity. I think it's gone to a better coaching situation, better GM situation.
Hmm.
They're building something where Jared Goff will throw outside the numbers. Like he's not just like a slot target Cooper Cup dude. Like you
Hmm.
saw what Josh Reynolds did when he had his stints, and he's familiar with Jared Goff, so that definitely helped. But Jared Goff is willing to target those areas. They targeted Marvin Jones for a reason. Like that type of archetype and receiver they really need because they think that complements what Amon Ra can do in the slot, what Sam Laporta is going to bring to the tight end now, who I'm really high on. And then you got those Burner and Jamison Williams. When you're thinking about like the archetypes that wide receivers are looking for, they think Denzel Mims is the answer, and
Hmm.
he's only 25. If you think about his upside and like what the starting trio would look like if this move works out, Denzel Mims is going to be 26 next year. Amon Ross St. Brown is going to be 24, and Williams is going to be 20.
Hmm.
They're basically set with their starting like monsters on their team. Like this could easily be like one of the scariest trios in the NFL. And I know we say that a lot for like the Bengals and the Seahawks, but
Hmm.
I really think the Lions have that potential in the next 3 to 4 years if Mims like continues on this trajectory with what he's already shown and what he can build in.
Hmm.
Because He is a fantastic and talented receiver out of Baylor. Any other thoughts on this? What do you think like this means on the Jets? I didn't hear your take on it, so I'm curious to see uh, why they would trade him.
Um, I think, I mean, like Aaron Rodgers brought in his guys that he liked and wanted, and so I think that plus the fact that I guess there was like a big connect in general between coaching and um, Mims in the first place. I think really opened up, I guess, the option to trade him away just because, again, I don't think they really saw him as a part of their, I guess, win now future because obviously they're in win now mode with uh, Aaron Rodgers, and if he's not part of the Aaron Rodgers dream, I guess, then it's not really like a super focal point of keeping him back on the offense.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a mistake for them personally
Mm-hmm.
because I think whenever you're trying to manage an organization and players, you always want to build towards what the player can do well. And I don't think the Jets have done that from the beginning with this guy. So I think it's good for Denzel Mims, but I'm starting to not feel as confident in my Jets predictions on how high they can finish. Just in the little things I'm seeing in like and their decision making
Hmm.
and like how they're choosing to build around Aaron Rodgers, it doesn't like I'm not feeling confident. I still like the piece they have in the running back room. I really like it a lot.
Hmm.
What Tyler Conklin brings, and obviously I love Garrett Wilson. But
Hmm.
like outside of that, I'm just like, huh? So so it'll be interesting to see like how the Lions and Jets fare both because there's a lot of hype around both teams for good reason. But yeah, the Jets have me
Hmm.
questioning things. The Lions, I think this is a smart move, Ben. Like Brad Holmes has done a fantastic job building this team from the ground up, and
Yeah.
I know Dan Campbell's going to bring the best out of it. All right, we got through the big NFL news stories after a while. And we finally caught up with the trades. I think we're good.
Hmm.
Um, here's not trying to jinx it for tomorrow, but anyhow, we're gonna talk about a team that lost by a field goal in the AFC Championship game, and I think it's the start of one of these like incredible rivalries in the AFC when you're thinking about the top of the crown, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals.
Hmm.
They have proven time and time again like they can match up with Kansas City and give them a dogfight every single matchup, and they won three of those matchups. Lost this one for the first time by a field goal in the AFC Championship game.
Hmm.
They had a great run to defend their title, to be honest. When you're considering teams like this, normally when you're considering teams like the Falcons and the Rams have recently. Like teams don't do well like after they like either win the Super Bowl or get to that Super Bowl point.
Hmm.
It's very hard to get back, but I think these are one of the most like mentally tough teams. Like they have resolve, they have the quarterback talent like at the top three in any order. If you want Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, I don't mind
Hmm.
any order to be honest. It should be Mahomes at one, but if some people say Burrow at one, I'm not like thinking of them like crazy as long as they have Mahomes
Hmm.
too. But this is top to bottom. This is a great roster too. They
Hmm.
just signed back Joe Mixon as well, so he's coming back for another year. But when we were doing our schedules, both of us had this team like right up there with Kansas City. Like they're
Hmm.
finishing like at the top two seeds in the conference. What is your outlook on this team heading to the season? What do you want to see from them?
Um, Honestly, just do what you've been doing. This is again a really good built team. Um, like looking through their roster, they have really good players, kind of just all over the place. I mean, especially their offense. Their offense is it's really loaded. And I mean, I don't see what would have happened this offseason that would potentially make them a significantly worse team than they were last season and the season before. And so um, I think they're just going to stay up there with the tops, the best of the best. Um, and I mean, in our schedule here, I have them losing 4 games, but feel like again, those games are technically winnable for them, and so uh, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's not too much to say just because everyone kind of expects the same almost of the Bengals, unless you're a fan of another team in the division that hates the Bengals, which I understand.
Yeah, and when going through our schedules, we kind of gave them favorable records like throughout the division. I think you had them
Hmm.
going 4-2 in their division,
Hmm.
and I have them going the same. But like this division, as you'll see in like the other teams as we cover, is one of like the toughest divisions, like notorious. Like you always see like 20-17, 23-20, like low scoring
Hmm.
affairs relative to how offenses like offensively focused the NFL is now. And I always love that part about watching AFC divisional matchups. So I could easily see them losing like a couple of these games. But like I think the thing that stands out to me is when we look through like weeks 8 through 13, we're like fairly confident they can win those games. Like we both
Hmm.
have them going on like long stretches of winning streaks where
Hmm.
obviously, I have them crazy. Like I have them winning 15 games. I think they're going to finish the top of the conference, obviously, and
Hmm.
grab that home field advantage. Going to be the first 15 win team with 2 losses, like in the NFL, like highest record when they move
Hmm.
into the 18 game season. But yeah, like against like the top quarterbacks in the led teams, like for the most part, we had them winning those matchups because of how they complemented their receiving room, the defense, like, and it's not like they're making like high price signings. It's very smart GM like philosophies being applied to this team.
Hmm.
And I think the combination of that like puts this team in a healthy standpoint where they can maximize Joe Burrow's window right now. And they can easily be back to where they started. Alrighty. Let's talk about the roster that you were on high about
Yeah.
real quick. So we got Joe Burrow, the one true legend, Joey B.
Hmm.
Then we got the other Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, my favorite receiver trio, like highlighted by my favorite wide receiver in the league. Then you got Irv Smith, tight end, and you see a lot of changes in the offensive line. So
Hmm.
looking at this offense, why do you think they're one of the most high powered in the league?
Um, well, obviously you forgot about their amazing backup quarterback, the Seaman Demon, Trevor Simeon. um, yeah, but I think that just overall they have. I mean, again, their starting lineup is a star-studded cast. And then they have. I mean, I guess receiver backups are kind of weak, but I feel like the rest of the positions have solid backups playing. And I mean, when you have three starting receivers that could arguably be a wide receiver 1-2 on basically every other team in the NFL. Um, I feel like you don't have to be too concerned about I guess how deep your receiver room is because you think about if hypothetically Jamar Chase and T Higgins got hurt for like 2 weeks at the same time, like I don't think they'd really be too hindered with Tyler Boyd being their number one with whichever other guys which I know can play like decent, especially if they're not having to be the number one guys, which their backups will never really ever have to play as the number one receiver for this team, which I think helps me think that they can really just stay in any game despite injuries that may happen to this team.
Yeah, and two of their receivers are draft picks. Keep in mind. So
Hmm.
um, there's a lot of good things to talked about with Charlie Jones coming out in camp. I don't know too much about him. I didn't study him that much, but I know Andre Ivrio Savas. He's had some good reviews from what I've read. And Trenton Irvin is not like he's not like gonna like substitute for Jamar Chase or something like that, but he's like a serviceable like contributor.
Hmm.
So in
Hmm.
those like 4 for 5, 6 roles, I think they're okay. I really like what they did with Chase Brown. If you think about
Hmm.
them losing Samaje Perine, who was probably one of the more underrated running backs for that team, just got signed on to your Broncos, which I think was a good move by them.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, go ahead. It's a good signing. Um, I think they got a good replacement, like Chase
Hmm.
Brown out of Illinois. He's extremely talented. Like I could easily see him stepping up. Like if they decide to part ways with Joe Mixon, and he didn't resign with them. Like
Hmm.
I'd feel comfortable with him leading the backfield. Trevion Evans can do not Trayvon Evans. I combined the 3 and 4 running backs. I think I got confused by seeing
Hmm.
Captain America over there on the fourth string. But Trayvon Williams, like he can also like contribute. Like it's not a bad thing. Like Trevor Simeon was like I didn't have a problem with him on the Bears for like the role he had. Like he can contribute to the system. Um, I think the one key thing is can Irv Smith stay healthy
Hmm.
because that's his like the injury bug is really cost him. Like, don't even get me started about the amount of potential he had on the Vikings.
Hmm.
People were really hyped about him, and the hype is genuine. He's a great receiver. If he adds a different dynamic to this team, like it's just another Buffalo situation where it's just like, okay, like Jamar Chase is like the most uncoverable dude in the league. Okay,
Hmm.
we're screwed. Then you add like T. Higgins, who's a behemoth. Just add another behemoth in there and Irv Smith, and how like which guy do you leave open? Like
Hmm.
if
Yeah.
he reaches that potential, it's just another Buffalo, Kansas City, like another dimension being added. Like okay, we have no hope stopping these dudes.
Yeah. And yeah, what I think is great as well is just the fact that Irv Smith doesn't have to come in and be, the key focal point of this offense that I think people may have expected him to be with the Vikings when he, kind of when they phased out Kyle Rudolph in favor for Irv Smith. And so, all he has to do is be consistently average, and that'll be perfectly fine for this offense. Just because you have the superstars quite literally everywhere else on this offense that he doesn't have to do anything crazy for this team besides, be a solid, just chain mover if anything.
Exactly, and I love how they adjusted their O line
Hmm.
with Alex Kappa and Orlando Brown. Like that was a huge steal for them. Like getting Orlando Brown from the Chiefs.
Hmm.
I think they're not just leaving Joe Burrow out to dry. Like you remember like the one like unfortunate season where he suffered an ACL. Like even
Hmm.
before that, the offensive line was just a mess. And I think compared to how the state of that offensive line, this is in a much better position. There's still some holes, but it's like a situation where like it's not as big as an issue because like Joe Burrow's an approximation
Hmm.
and Tom Brady on like the skill set of getting the ball out quickly.
Hmm.
So it's not like the worst thing in the world when you add more talent to the offensive line, but you still have a tiny bit of hole. So that part doesn't worry me as much. But well-rounded starting 11. They have some promising pieces in the running back and receiver positions that can develop behind these studs. But great job, great job by this team.
Hmm.
All right, let's look at that underrated defense. Like the thing that stands out to me is like nobody talks about how Wilson and Pratt are a great linebacking duo that just
Hmm.
complements each other. And then you talk about the same thing with Hubbard and Hendrickson. Like when you think about like pass rushing duos, who do you think about? You think about Chandler Jones and Max Crosby. You
Hmm.
think about like the Nick Bosa and then like whoever's on the opposite side of him at San Francisco.
Hmm.
Like TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. You don't really talk about Hubbard and Hendrickson a lot.
Hmm.
Like even like the D tackles, like DJ Reader and BJ Hill, they're not
Hmm.
talked about as much. But the
Yeah.
defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo has done a fantastic job placing these guys in the right position, and they've done
Hmm.
a fantastic job, like really stepping up when they need to.
Hmm. Yeah, and like I think this on the defensive side as well. There's really good depth behind the starters, and I think that is one of the, I guess, more impressive things about this team besides the star-studded talent they already have in the first place. But the fact that behind those guys, you have guys that I'd feel relatively comfortable starting, especially at that pass rushing section where you have Miles Murphy, you have Joseph Osai, um, as your, I guess, guys that you can do is put in as rotational pass rushers to give Hendrickson and Hubbard breaks. You have, I think, solid just depth within your secondary as well. I guess the one thing I would say is maybe the secondary doesn't have like the big it factor elite player that I think a lot of teams want in their secondary. I know they just lost their guy Jesse Bates in this last offseason, so I guess
Yeah, that was a
that
crucial
was their
loss.
big guy. But I mean, I do like Awuzie. I think he's pretty solid. I think Taylor Britt could be okay. I do think DJ Turner's pretty solid. Mike Hilton's solid. I even think Sidney Jones is pretty serviceable for being, I guess, fifth in the depth chart
Mhm.
amongst all these guys. I'd like the pick up of Jordan Battle here. Obviously, the greatest Saints receiver, Michael Thomas, is on this team. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but overall, yeah, despite maybe not having that superstar talent that you want in the secondary, I think just because the rest of the defense is so good that you're not needing to rely on having the best of the best back here when they're already serviceable in the first place.
Yeah, and with the presence of zone coverage, there's things you could do with like the pieces you have. Like Nick
Hmm.
Scott was amazing on the Rams. Like and he's like there it's just such a Bengals thing. Like they'll just pick guys that are like not the elite players, like just that like mid to like good, like they'll do well and we'll just like amplify like how what their production is like when they hit our team because of like what we have surrounded by. Like I think this defense is definitely led by the front seven, and like they're just like a like if you think about the Ravens under um who is their defensive coordinator, the Giants now, like when
Oh,
he was under
Martindale.
Martindale, yeah. When you think about like Martindale, he would always like scheme up like exotic blitzes.
Hmm.
Like Anarumo's in that certain way, like where he like will mix up like the two high coverages and like the pass rush and add stunts and stuff like this is a team that like likes to do a lot of that. So when you have that, you don't really need to focus so much on like getting the most secondary value. Like obviously if you have a Jalen Ramsey, that's even more power to you. I
Hmm.
think Awuzie is like one of those number one corners that like is ideal for a team that can't afford a Jalen Ramsey. Like
Hmm.
this is exactly the spot they want to be in. And I think with like the offense like that, this is the type of defense you like need to have to like consistently sustain
Hmm.
yourself. So um this is a defense that can definitely get you the 2 or 3 possessions that offense needs to put the game away.
Hmm.
All right. So that's our talk. I hope you convinced you that I convinced you at least that the Bengals are going to be the top dog in the AFC. Uphill
Hmm.
climb, a lot of competition, but I think they're battle tested and proven enough that they can
Hmm.
top any team you put up with them.
Hmm.
Um, but they're going to have some stiff competition because both of us had the Ravens like being hotly contested to them, which is interesting considering the way last season and the last couple of seasons they just always seem to be bit by the injury bug. A lot of questions about Greg Roman's offensive
Hmm.
scheme and how like it's a great running game, but the passing game leaves a lot to be desired. Having that narrative and then like, yeah, I don't think Lamar is a great passer, and you have that, and then they just acquired Roquan Smith. Their defense has always been really good, really set. Like, what's the reason you have this team doing really well this season? I want to hear your take on
Yeah. Well, I think despite their lack of success in the past couple seasons, they've always been able to be a good team. Um, and I think that's kind of just bleeds into this season. It almost feels like the Chargers of the last decade as well, of them being technically really good teams, but something happens and they always kind of fall short. And I think the past couple seasons have been kind of reminiscent to that, that Chargers, I guess, stereotype that everyone kind of knew about during the 2010s, I feel. But with that said, I think that this team has great pieces on both the offense and the defense. I feel like whenever Lamar's playing, you can't really count out this team. Um, and so that's kind of the reason why I have them doing pretty good this season. Still think the Bengals are probably the best team in this division, but um, yeah, I think they're gonna put up a lot of wins. I feel like their schedule they have a couple hard opponents, but they have a decent amount of winnable games. And so, we both have them winning 12, 13 games, which I wouldn't complain about.
Yeah, we're both on the same page on how we're projecting the team to finish. Like,
Hmm.
and honestly, there's their like strength of schedule from like an eye test standpoint, just on like where we see these teams this season, is a lot better than the Bengals because they didn't win a division last year. So like just from that, like they have like lesser competition. They can easily win this division because of that. They like I had them losing both times to the Bengals. You have them splitting with the Bengals. I could
Hmm.
easily see that possibility. I can even see them like splitting with the Steelers or the Browns, and I've indicated that on
Hmm.
my schedule. They can win both of those games. It's just that's just the nature of the division. But I like what you said about Lamar, um, because in the standpoint of as we cover this team and this offense, and we've seen the moves they make. They done a really good job, and then they changed to Todd Monken, who I think might be the most underrated coaching move this offseason because it's gonna unlock a different element of Lamar. If you watch Lamar in Louisville, um, he could pass the ball. Like he had to learn a
Mhm.
pro style offense, so it wasn't like he was new to the pro passing style. Like it just wasn't called because they were just like Lamar is basically Justin Fields except better and more elusive.
Mhm.
And why don't we just lean on that and then the running game we have because we have a lot of these good backs. And they invest in J.K. Dobbins, like Gus Edwards,
Mhm.
tight ends that can block and receive, and the emergence of Mark Andrews helped them. Like so, like all these factors like led into them like leading on the run so hard, and it helped that they had a great defense where they can play that complementary style. But I think they realize now, like at a certain point, like in those third and long situations, you can't always run the ball or
Mhm.
rely on Lamar to scramble. You have to throw it outside the numbers, generate concepts, put defenses in the bind, and I think not enough of that was called.
Mhm.
So back to their schedule, like we easily see them like we're winning like 8 weeks, 8 through 10, and then after the bye, they're just going on a tear. We can
Mhm.
easily see them like beating the Jaguars, the Dolphins, the 49ers. They might lose some of them. We don't know. But we just have a lot of confidence with this team, I think, on where they're headed because of the moves they made. And the fact that Lamar was a rating MVP. It's
Yeah.
not like he's bad at football. Like it's not like he has any deficiencies. We just don't know because we haven't seen it on the pro style, like on the pro level yet. But he has a skill set to do it. It's just
Mhm.
not realized.
Yeah.
With that, we'll talk about the set offense and what changes they made. Most notably, they added Odo Beckham and they just drafted Zay Flowers to
Mhm.
add to what they've had with Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, Nelson Aguilar. Um, a lot they managed to keep Tyler Huntley. They still have J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Patrick Ricard is a notable guy because he's one of the few fullbacks that are used as often as he is, and is an all-star at what he does. He's a
Mhm.
key cog for this team. But you look at their old line, it's good. It's really
Mhm.
good. And then you got Mark Andrews. Isaiah Likely broke out. Charlie
Mhm.
Corler is also a good third string tight end I don't think people know about as much. But you look at this team, you're like, what the heck? They suddenly have offensive depth.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is another one of those teams that just are look pretty stacked from top to bottom. I mean, like I think people even forget a lot about Rashad Bateman. He hasn't had like the career that most people wanted him to have, but I mean, the start of the season when he was healthy last year, he was looking like he was, that next breakout superstar receiver potentially for this Ravens offense. And then the injury bug hit, and so I guess the concern is, can he stay healthy for the entire season too? And can he uh, be consistent, consistently put up those superstar receiver numbers? And I think that's, I guess, the question. But at the same time, you do have the likes of Beckham, Flowers, to be other legitimate passing options in this offense. Um, Obviously, they got the great Mike Thomas, not to be mistaken with the other great Mike Thomas, but I guess this division really likes their Mike Thomases, and so you can never count them out. But um, yeah, I mean, the receiver depth's really, really nice. It's like Nelson Aguilar, wasn't he like starting for the Patriots last season or something?
Yeah, and now he's a backup. What the heck? And Andy
Yeah,
Isabella, like I just recognized him. That was a while ago.
yeah. And so it's like, I mean, like, I'm not necessarily high on Aguilar, but the fact that he has starting experience throughout the course of his career and has been signed to somewhat nice contracts to play receiver for teams as a starter and is now, the listed number 5 guy on this team. It's pretty nice. I'm a huge, huge fan of Zay Flowers. I talked about him during the pre-draft process. I was pretty hyped for the Ravens to draft him. I think that he had great draft capital. It's where I think he should have been taken. Um, yeah, I think that likely is another phenomenal guy. I had him on and off of my fantasy team last season when Mark Andrews was sitting out a couple games. But um, yeah, and then their offensive line. really good. I know they lost Ben Powers this last offseason, and I know he's a big part of their team, but I mean, they got, Ben Cleveland, Kevin Zeitler as their guards, which are solid options to have. Ronnie Staley's phenomenal. Tyler Linderbaum's a pretty solid guy. I'd say Morgan Moses is the weakest link maybe on this offense. Um, but he's a veteran player that has started for most of his career, I'd like to say. And so it's like, I don't know. It's a pretty nice team to have. I know I say this about a lot of teams, but there are a lot of good teams in the NFL, and uh, Ravens are definitely one of the teams up there.
Yeah, the great like I think it's just a product of injury over the last couple of seasons. Like
Hmm.
you really got to see a lot of these guys get some shine, get some playing time. Like Duvernay had a stretch where he was like really good in the roles that he was providing. He's just another element of what they add. And like I've been high on Tylan Wallace. I think he's another one of those Denzel Mims. If he gets a second landing spot and like a starting opportunity, he could really do a lot of great things. Laquan Treadwell did some good things on the Jaguars, and he's their fourth string wide receiver. I just think it's a very good depth outlined everything because of like what they had to deal with over the past couple of seasons. I love what you said about Rashad Bateman. Like, like he's been the one wide receiver where like I've seen him mock drafts, like still there like the 13th or 14th round, and it's like we don't know what this offense is gonna look like yet with Todd Monken. We know it's gonna
Hmm.
based on what he did at Georgia. He's gonna play to the strengths of his quarterback, but he's gonna have like a conceptual based passing attack that's advanced, where you're gonna have three wide receiver sets. So like any one of Bateman, Beckham, and Zay Flowers can get wide open. And I think people are just assuming like Bateman's gonna be the number one, Zay is gonna be like the rookie of the year, and then like because of that, Bateman's not gonna get enough like targets or touches. Where
Hmm.
I could easily see this where like Beckham gets 1,000 yards, like Flowers gets like 800, 900 yards, or even less than that. And Bateman's the one that's the secondary receiver with like 900 to 1,000 yards. Like Lamar Jackson's capable of passing for 3,000, 3,500 yards and
Hmm.
spreading the wealth like that. And you also have Mark Andrews too to keep in mind. Like this is a guy like and Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman like kind of making the arguments for both. Like Lamar Jackson can throw for 4,000 yards, 4,500 yards, and Bateman can have 900 to 1,000 yards. Both things are true. So I think like undervaluing any of these receivers in drafts is a big mistake. I think
Hmm.
if you're investing like in that fantasy realm, like invest in Zay Flowers and Shop Bateman and Odell. Like if you get any one of them, great. If you get two of them, great. If you manage to get all three of them, awesome. Like because if one of them gets hurt, you have the other
Hmm.
like key options.
Hmm.
And um, just from a football perspective, like this is a great thing to have for Lamar because has guys that can quickly get open, and that you have a shot Bateman who could do things down the boundary. Odell can also do things down the boundary, but like I think the quickness on this team got a lot better from the receiver position and the route running ability, and that's only going to help Lamar because now he can go through his passing concepts and pass the run rather than just run all the time because like he didn't have the weapons to get open besides Mark Andrews in time.
Hmm.
And now he has to scramble and make something happen. It's gonna take less pressure off Lamar. It's gonna make him even more dangerous.
Yeah, like this team is already a playoff threat with just Bateman and Andrews as like the two offensive focal points. But now you do have Beckham, and now you have Flowers, plus the emergence of Likely, all to add to uh, this being an even more dangerous playoff threat, which I think, despite everyone kind of knowing this is a good team, will kind of surprise a lot of people in terms of how well they do this upcoming season.
Yeah, like the ceiling on this team and the floor is like too wide in the public perception. And I
Hmm.
think this is a team that can finish as high as the fifth seed and as high as the one seed at the same time. Like
Hmm.
it's just the nature of this division with the Bengals and then like the Browns coming up as well, in my opinion. But this team definitely has the talent and the depth to compete with the Buffalo, Kansas City, and the Bengals. We just have to see how this offense is put together. I think I think it's going to be a marriage made in heaven between Munkin and Jackson. I think that's going to work out, and I think this team is going to be like up there, but we have to see it. Let's see.
Hmm.
All right. We're gonna go to their vaunted defense. This is another one of those teams where like the edge rushers aren't like what we're used to hearing. Like you're not like you don't have like the TJ Watt like
Hmm.
recognition, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack like on this team. But don't even get me started because like they have top tier linebackers in Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen's coming on his own. He's done an amazing development since his rookie year. Then they just invested in Kyle Hamilton, and they got Rocky Sin to add to what they have in Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Williams. I think top to bottom, well done on the starting defensive like
Hmm.
end. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is they have a lot of superstar talent on this defense, which is nice. I mean, having Roquan to kind of, I guess, be your commanding middle linebacker is a pretty nice thing to have. I do think that there's potential Patrick Queen doesn't stay on this team long term. He may be here for this upcoming season, but they did just invest in Trenton Simpson in this last draft and with pretty high capital. And I was really high on Trenton Simpson in the first place. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he is prepped to kind of be the Patrick Queen replacement. But I mean, for this upcoming season, to have guys like Malik Harrison and Trenton Simpson as your backup linebackers to Roquan and Queen is a pretty nice thing to have. And I like Odafe Owe and I like Tyus Bowser. I think they're an underrated duo um, that can just surprisingly dominate offensive lines in terms of pass rush. And again, yeah, you can't ignore the likes of Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Williams, and Kyle Hamilton. I think Rocky Sin's a middling talent, but again, when you have three other superstars in your secondary, uh, having a fourth guy that isn't as great isn't the biggest worry, I guess.
Yeah, and he's in another situation where like he didn't pan out with the Colts,
Hmm.
like as much as they expected. Otherwise, they would have re-signed him, and
Hmm.
the Ravens took advantage. They seem to do that like with their draft philosophy, where they just let the board come to them, and they end up with like just studs. Like
Hmm.
I even look at their defensive line. You were talking about Owe and Bowser. Well, they're going to get the one-on-one opportunities because of what Michael Pierce and Matabuke are going to command. Like they're great talents on the end, and like Brent Urban, like good rotational piece that they have there. Angelo Blackson was surprisingly great on the Bears. Um,
Hmm.
then you add, let's see here. Oh, they have Traylon Mullen. There's like
Hmm.
secondary depth. I really like that for them. Um, I don't know too much on their backups and as far as like the safeties, but I think Brandon Stevens like played well from what I've seen from him. Um, it's a well constructed roster from like the starting end and like the depth. The depth is there. The depth is there, but um, not as good as Cincinnati, but this is another team where they just need to get 3 to 4 stops, and I think they can get more than that,
Hmm.
really, and really allow Lamar Jackson to like have more possessions to
Hmm.
work with.
Yeah, this defense easily has the potential to be one of like the top three defenses in the league this upcoming season.
Yeah,
I know it varies a lot. There's a lot of good defenses in the NFL, but
yeah,
this team certainly has the players and the potential to, reach that. Definitely think that is their ceiling, being a top three defense. Um, and I mean, and you just can look at this depth chart and see that, yeah, they have the guys to make a top three defense. And so that, and then obviously you have Justin Tucker as your kicker, which we don't go too much into special teams, but it's a nice kicker to have. We glossed over to the Bengals, Evan McPherson, which he's also a pretty solid kicker. This is a nice division of kickers, but um, yeah, I mean, these teams have, I feel like even thinking about the Bengals, both these two teams have pretty solid special teams as well. And people oftentimes forget about that third facet of the NFL games, which is the special teams. And I've seen the Broncos mess up so many games due to poor special teams. And then there's the one game, um, Patriots and Jets last season, right, where there was the punt return
a punt
touchdown, I
return for
believe.
the game-winning touchdown. Yeah,
Yeah, and well, I mean, it's more Zach Wilson's fault for that. Or I think he was starting that game, but but the fact that a good special teams was able to overcome and be the difference maker in that game, and so I think just it's important to acknowledge. how good this special teams unit is. Um, Devin Duvernay, he's been on the team for a while. He's a solid receiver, and the fact that he can play, the return man is pretty nice to have in an offense or just in a team in general.
Yeah, and he's another guy that can be that difference maker in the return game for them. So I think like slotting him in the fourth and the fifth role, like as a wide receiver, allows him more to concentrate on like what he can do as a punt returner and a kick returner.
Hmm.
Because you'll be surprised like the types of coverages and like how you can call like fake punt returns and kick returns and really like leverage that. Like this team can execute it, and Justice Hill can do the same thing. So they got a lot of options and a lot of depth now. If you want to look at it positive on how they performed on the previous seasons, and like you mentioned, like I think it's going to be between them and the Bengals, like because they're equally constructed rosters that are well put together. Like it's just my opinion that I think the Bengals are
Hmm.
better, but
Yeah.
like would I be surprised if the Ravens like come on top in this division? No, I wouldn't be, because after all, injury plays a factor, and then also, like they have a new offense where we don't know what it's going to look like yet. Well, one thing's for sure: these are two dogs, and they're going to get in a dog fight.
Hmm.
But I don't know if there's a bigger dog than the dog pound in Cleveland. So we're going to pull up that, and that beautiful segue has come to an end. But this is a team in transition, and they got a lot of slack for how they handled like the guarantee contract with Sean Watson. Sean Watson coming back after so long, a lot of allegations against him. Had a suspension he had to fulfill against the NFL. Um, wasn't his best year when he came back. Um, almost felt like he was on his rookie year in the contract, but
Hmm.
with the moves they made and the crazy wide receiver depth they've had, like acquired this offseason, feels like they're going all in on Deshaun
Hmm.
Watson.
Yeah, I think they certainly built this team to compete. I mean, that's how they built it with Baker. And I feel like once they've had Baker, they've always been in that room to compete, despite having a fair amount of unsuccessful seasons. It always feels like they're a team that is just barely missing out of being in it in terms of like a deep playoff run, a deep playoff contender. And so I think that the fact that they have Deshaun Watson, they're not having to rebuild the rest of the team around him, which I think is really nice. Uh, Comparatively, I feel like a few other teams you kind of see that what they bring in a quarterback, and then there's like a lot of scrambling to figure out to fix the holes within that team. And I feel like we saw that kind of with the Broncos last season, where I mean, they have good players, but there was also a lot of holes on that team. You see this, I think, this season with the Jets in terms of that you bring the star that is Aaron Rodgers, but when we kind of did a deep dive into their depth chart and their roster in general, we kind of saw a couple holes within that team, and so I think the Cleveland Browns have just done a good job keeping talent consistently on the team so that no matter who the quarterback is, they can always contend.
Yeah, and you brought up a lot of great points there. I think the number one point is this division has a lot of great teams, and the
Hmm.
Browns are another team that we don't think is going to do as well as
Hmm.
like Baltimore and Cincinnati, but they have the personnel in place to do so. Like after all, they have, in my opinion, the best running back in the league.
Hmm.
With Nick Chubb. Like it's all
Hmm.
like it's almost like he's like unheard of or like forgotten about.
Hmm.
Like compared to like the rest of the roster now. But Amari Cooper's the number one wide receiver. Then you got
Hmm.
like Cedric Tillman, Donovan Peoples Jones. Like now they've added Elijah Moore. There's just like a ton of more options on this team where now you're seeing, okay, they're trying to craft a passing attack around their quarterback that they're confident in. And they have like one of the best guard duos in the league. And when you consider that in this totality, like this is a team that can also compete for the division crown. Um, I think you have them at 9 wins. I
Hmm.
have them at 11. It comes down to the quarterback play. And I think
Hmm.
it's fair to like put Deshaun Watson lower than Burrow and Jackson because we we haven't seen him at his best truly since he was on the Texans competing
Hmm.
for against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. In that infamous, don't even get me started. Bill O'Brien should have been fired at halftime. Like after
Honestly,
that, like how do you lose the lead at halftime? Like I just
Hmm.
don't believe like that's crazy winning up that big.
Hmm.
Anyway, like we look at their schedule, like we're pretty confident they could beat like the middling teams, like the Steelers in their division, like the
Hmm.
Titans. Well, it's they could also lose that one with the Hopkins. Like that's like a nip and tuck
Yeah.
game. But we both had them winning at the time we made this. Um, and they could also beat the Seahawks. They could also lose this year. It all depends on is Watson the same player as he is,
Hmm.
because that's going to determine like how far they go. Like I know you had them at 9 wins, but I could even see them winning as much as 6 or 7, or they
Hmm.
can win like 12 games. Like that's where it feels like their range of like floor and ceiling are.
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like this team almost feel reminiscent of like the Broncos of last season in terms of, I guess you could argue, I mean, with better coaching, but good quarterback play elevates Broncos to like a record somewhat like 11-6, 9-8 or something. But we kind of saw awful quarterback play happen last season with Denver, leading to an atrocious season. And so I think, yeah, Deshaun Watson getting back to form will be a huge factor in this. I do think that there will be, just with the fact that he hasn't played, I guess, good football in so long. He had towards the end of the season last year, he had a couple of good games, but I think he's had an off season to kind of get back into things. But then again, it's off season isn't game NFL game football, and so I think that there's going to be a little bit of relearning, I guess, of just getting back into the grind of football um, and even with that, I still have them, going over 500 with a positive, going 9-8, and I do think that they can play better than this, especially like I said earlier, their roster is really well built. They've kept a solid roster despite, I guess, the struggles at the quarterback position and just varying other inconsistencies with this team. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think like your explanation fits right in like what you think they're gonna do like the first like 4 weeks before the bye, and then like San Francisco after that. You think they're gonna start out 2-3, but they're
Hmm.
gonna come out like establish a rhythm, and that's when they'll get their wins
Hmm.
and things of that nature. And I could totally see that playing out as well. Um, like they could split like against the Bengals and the Ravens, and then also like they can go like 2-1 in that first stretch of 4 games because they have like 3 division games right out of the gate. That's always
Hmm.
gonna like pose a challenge. Like we'll know like where the Browns stand against their division after week 4, kind of. But also like how does Deshaun Watson like get into a rhythm after that? That's like important factors to
Hmm.
take into account. So we both have them losing to the Ravens and the Steelers week 10 and 11. They could easily like win one or two of those. They could split
Hmm.
those like 2 games. But there's a lot of like unknowns from the standpoint. They're a lot like the Cowboys, and
Hmm.
they could lose to the Colts. They could lose to like LA, or the Texans, who we think like are clearly inferior teams based on the talent level. But you never know with this team either. With that said, let's look at their offensive roster,
Hmm.
see who else besides Nick Chubb is there. Um, but I, I really like the DTR coming out of the draft to this team, like because he landed in the perfect spot where he can just like develop. He doesn't have to worry about like taking the starting job right
Hmm.
away. Same thing for Kellen Mond. They're both in like unique positions where they could just sit and learn behind Deshaun Watson.
Hmm.
And I'm really high on Jerome Ford, Cedric Tillman, David Bell, like all depth pieces. They've done a really good
Hmm.
job shelving out this roster. I think it's no coincidence why we have like the 3 teams in order that we covered: the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Browns, and we all pretty much love their rosters. Like
Hmm.
really well, like run front offices and coaching staffs. We got to give them credit.
Hmm. Yeah, I just keep on saying how great of a roster this team has. I really like the receiver room. I mean, they have like a good mix of young talent and veteran players, which I think is a pretty nice, mix to have. Kind of funny how you got Marquise Goodwin and Jakeem Grant, who are basically the same players, but um, Yeah, I am a fan of some of the younger talent they have in, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman. I do like David Bell. I I was a big fan of David Bell last season, but just kind of with how this depth chart is looking to shape up, I guess my concerns about him are starting to rise in the fact that I thought he was going to have a lot more playtime last season, and he looked like he should have had more playtime, but I guess something may be the issue with this team in terms of maybe they're not as high on him as maybe just the general public might be, because I feel like every, you know, deep roster diving kind of fan that I know and I like to read about kind of loves David Bell, but is concerned about the fact that they brought in so much talent despite him being a potential high ceiling guy on this team.
Yeah, and the fact that they traded for Moore doesn't help matters because like
Hmm.
Moore's like an elite slot option that wasn't realized. Like there's a lot of
Hmm.
great young talent on this team. Like I'm really high on Cedric Tillman and David Bell from the past two draft classes.
Hmm.
Um, I thought they would get starting roles, but like on this team, like they don't have to, and that's probably good for their career development.
Hmm.
But I'm with you. I expected David Bell to like kind of take over. Like when people thought Njoku was gonna break out, I really thought David Bell would, and Njoku
Hmm.
surprised me. He really did some great things as a pass catcher. He still needs things to clean up, but
Hmm.
he's good in this role. Like Boston can maximize him. Um, so that's a good point you brought up. It's gonna be interesting how they work out the Goodwin and Jaqueen like situation. It's just um like fast wide receiver, add Jalen Darden. Like give me more. Like fast wide receiver, send him to the Browns. Like they really like that archetype like in their
Yeah,
depth. It looks like compared to like
got
when
to
you
bring
have Peoples
Deshaun
Jones,
Jackson
Elijah
out of
Moore.
retirement.
Yeah, the pulling Deshaun Jackson, like pulling all those guys.
Bring
Yeah,
Devin Hester out of retirement. Bring Percy Harvin out of retirement just to play for
Tavon
the Browns
Austin.
for a
Yeah,
season. Tavon Austin, yeah,
just add them all. Like how many receivers? It's almost like the Bears and kickers. Like
yeah.
that's looking like the same thing here. But the notable thing is they didn't bring back Kareem Hunt, and I think that
Hmm.
says a lot about where they feel their running back room is.
Hmm.
And I'm in agreement. I think Jerome Ford can actually spell for Nick Chubb in the same way that Kareem Hunt did, and he could take on a work mode if Nick Chubb
Hmm.
goes down. Um, he's probably, if I'm looking at handcuffs, he's the one I'm nabbing most because of what their offensive line can do,
Hmm.
like how they scheme the run game so well. They can run any guard pull in any direction because what Batonio and Teller can do. Best guard duo in the league. Then you got Conklin and Wills and like they're like surrounding guard and tackle positions are probably the best in the league
Hmm.
um, from like a run blocking and pass blocking perspective. So when you're considering Ford behind those lines and like with a quarterback like Deshaun Watson who knows how to pass the ball, like he's gonna put up some great numbers. So great handcuff to add. You're
Hmm.
welcome. But um, like the rest of the team, like even Harrison Bryant, like I'm surprised he's third on the depth chart for the tight ends, but he was a tight end I was super high on too. So if something happens where they're disappointed in Njoku, um, I think Bryant's better than Akins. He can do better things than Akins. I
Hmm.
personally think Akins is there because of familiarity with Watson from Houston,
Hmm.
but I would not be surprised. Like very good depth on this roster, if anything.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I feel like also with Bryant, there's probably just like a lack of tape on him compared to what we've seen from Akins, and so I mean in terms of we know what we got kind of standpoint. I understand the reasoning behind putting Akins as your number two guy, especially with the fact that you already know Njoku is going to probably be that top guy in this in terms of the tight end room, and so kind of after that, it's more of a middling mix or mess of we know what we have with Akins, but Bryant's probably better, and I feel like you could really switch that either way in terms of how you view this tight end room.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. They're good enough that they can run two tight end sets.
Hmm.
They're good enough where like you can run three tight end sets. And we didn't talk about enough about Nick Chubb because what's there to say?
Hmm.
He's the
Yeah,
best back in the league in my opinion. He's up there if not like the
yeah.
like you got to take him in the first round. That's the other thing. I see him taken in the second round. I'm like, thank you. like,
Yeah.
like, am I really gonna be disappointed if I draft Nick Chubb in the first round and have him on my? I'm not gonna be
Mhm.
disappointed with having him on my team. So
Yeah.
just my 2 cents on
Yeah. Nick Chubb's just been consistent his like whole career basically. I feel like the only other argument I'd have to him being like the number one would probably be Christian McCaffrey with just how he played last season. If he consistently stays healthy, I think that McCaffrey could arguably be the best running back in the league. But
that. Fair.
um, yeah, but yeah, I feel like it's if you say Nick Chubb's the best running back, I won't hold that against you. I think that's a very valid take. I won't argue against saying no. This is nitpick, random, weird data points that say that he's not. But yeah, no, I think that yeah, Nick Chubb is definitely one of the best. McCaffrey's probably up there. And those are probably the two best. Those are the two I would take, I feel,
Mhm.
for at least a contending team. If I were to go for running back, those are the two guys I'd go for.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like others we mentioned.
Hmm.
We're probably gonna make a like running back rankings list or something
Hmm.
like that who we like later on. So if you want to see
Hmm.
that, stay tuned to our podcast. We're gonna have those up. We're gonna have those up. But as far as the defense goes, there's there's some smart signings here. There's some smart
Hmm.
signings here, and I like the piece they have. It's a lot like what the Bengals have, where you don't know a lot of pieces, especially at the linebacker spot, but they can do the job. Like,
Hmm.
it's like well, the more and more I look at this roster, I'm like, I could see a scenario where they could finish second in the division, and then really like be like, how come the Ravens couldn't have a better record than this team, and the Bengals have a better record than this team?
Hmm.
But like you really look at the roster, they can do anything.
Hmm. Yeah, I think again, I mean, you did say there's some players that you maybe aren't super, or most people wouldn't be super well versed in, but there's still a lot of players that are, I feel like if you're like an average NFL fan or somewhat household names, I mean, you have Miles Garrett, who is talked about as amongst one of the best defensive end slash edge guys in the NFL. Darius Smith, yes, he's like a tier below that, but his stint with the Vikings and he was, the Vikings, he was with the Packers, he was with the Ravens, and I feel like each one of those places, he's put up really good numbers. He's shown that he's one of the better, pass rushers in the NFL. I'm a big fan of Dalvin Tomlinson. I actually really like JOK. I think he's an underrated guy. I feel like I guess I don't see too much like highlight clips or news stories about him, but I was a really big, I guess, fan of the Browns getting him when he was a rookie drafted there, and then obviously I do like their secondary. Um, yeah, there is no. I don't think I see a Mike Thomas here, but yeah, I have
There's a Mike
but
Ford.
there is, but they do have AJ Green, so I'll give them that, I guess. But um, yeah, I mean like Denzel Ward, I feel like when he first got into the league, everyone was talking about how great he was. And then I feel like just there's a bunch of superstar quarterbacks in the NFL nowadays that he just kind of gets forgotten about a lot of times. And then Greg Newsome, I thought he was a great option. I'm a fan of Grant Delpit. I like Juan Thornhill. Um, yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah.
if you think about the linebackers from Arizona, like Isaiah
Hmm.
Simmons, and then I don't remember the other one off the top of my head. Well, but like that kind of linebacker, like JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, he can do what Isaiah Simmons does. Like he can match up against running backs, tight ends, like even some receivers and stick with them. And like when you see the elite teams, like they're always matchup hunting for how do we get a slot receiver or like a Travis Kelsey on these tight ends. I mean on the linebackers. Because once that situation happens, like it's pretty much just find when he separates and we get an easy yardage, first down.
Hmm.
Like third down. Like that's the matchup where we hunt. You see the good quarterbacks do that
Hmm.
against this Browns team, there's no such thing as doing that because their linebackers can match. They can play man coverage if they want to. Grant Delpit, loved him from the draft. Denzel Ward, loved him. Greg Newsome, I thought was a great draft pick for them. And they got Warren Thornhill from the Chiefs. It's another like change of scenery. Like rookie season, like those two like didn't pan out. He got injured. Now he's in a starting role. Couple that with Ronnie McLeod as your backup. That's amazing to have that. Jacob Phillips as your backup in the linebacker spot. Amazing. I can't say too much about their defensive line depth per se. That might be something where it could be a concern, but that's just because I haven't watched these guys. So
They got Isaiah
that's me.
Thomas, man, the greatest basketball guy,
Yeah, I don't know if you want him like as your third string behind Miles Garrett, but like Thomas Graham did a lot of great things, like in the
hmm
cornerback for the Bears. Like I
Yeah.
thought the Bears should have kept him. Like,
hmm
there's they got some depth there, not to the degree that the Ravens do, but
hmm
this is still like a defense that can finish in the top 10. Like really, like if you're wondering why the AFC North is so low scoring, this is why. Like everybody invests in their defense and the running game,
hmm
and you love to see it. Like you love to see it. It's old school
hmm
football.
hmm
It's kind of interesting how they have Donovan Peoples Jones as the punt returner. I would
Yeah.
personally probably use Jakeem Grant or Jalen Darden, like in
hmm
that, or Demetri Felton. Like I probably wouldn't
Yeah.
put Donovan Peoples Jones there when he's the starting receiver, but I mean, hey, if they want to go that route, fine.
Yeah. I mean, if he's good at it, I feel like I wouldn't be the biggest worrier if, of all people, he was the one to get hurt on the team in terms of the receivers. But I mean, because I mean, I look at like Cedric Tillman, right? I see him, or I see the other talented pieces they have, and I'm like I don't know. I feel like he's good, but he's just like average good in terms of he could go anywhere and just be like an average player that gets consistently maybe like 600 to 800 receiving yards a year, which it is good, but
He's like that
I don't
Nico Collins type right now. That's what I feel
know.
like he is in his group.
Yeah, and so it's like he's good, but like not good good.
Yeah, yeah. I think also he's like it's looking like he's the odd man out in this scenario,
hmm
unless like the draft guys don't develop. Like,
Yeah.
and that'd be major disappointment because they invested a ton in the receiving room this year,
hmm
but they're trying to maximize that window. But
hmm
yeah, like I think our assessments are fair given where the state of the roster is, like especially on the defensive end, compared to where the Bengals and the Ravens are. But this is certainly a team that, like all teams in the division, has the potential to win it, compete, make it a dogfight, if you will.
hmm
Alrighty, last division team we're gonna be talking about within the AFC North, and I don't know. I feel like what makes this division the toughest is like no matter like who's on the Steelers roster, like they just never finish like 500 or worse than that. And you thought going into last season that that would definitely happen with Mitch Trubisky starting, and then like having Kenny Pickett there, and like Najee had a horrible like first half of the season. I
hmm
remember trading for him in fantasy, and I'm like, I'm gonna take advantage of it. Like people think Najee sucks, so I'm just gonna take advantage of it. And then just went on a tear where they just started winning games, and all
hmm
like for all you know, they finished well in the division. Like they finished with a winning record, and I think they finished third in the AFC North. So like having the Steelers in the division is never pretty because you know they're always going to compete. I think they finished at like 9-8 last year.
hmm
So I think I have them right around there this year because I'm like all they did was improve on the roster with their receivers.
hmm Yeah. Yeah, I have them. I mean, we're gonna go to the schedules in a sec, but um, I have them having a less than optimal season this year. But even like putting down the like I put down those records and like I had a hard time believing it for myself, just in the fact that like no matter what, they always seem to these like Tomlin's never had a losing season, and
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not the one to be the one to predict Mike Tomlin's first losing season. And like but then like I look at the schedule and I think that it's a moderately difficult schedule to have. Obviously there's a few games that I feel like are easy wins. I mean, I guess you could argue I could say that they beat the Raiders because I hate the Raiders so much. Maybe I should reverse that sometime just to. say I hate the Raiders so much more. But I feel like there's just a lot of competitive teams. Um, I guess I have them losing against the Cardinals. It's a shame on me. Cardinals really could go 0-16 this year, but I feel like this is one of those pity games I keep the Cardinals, and so I do think that there are a lot of wins here that, or like a lot of losses that could become wins for this Steelers team. Just like quickly running through, I think like the 50-50 games in my head that they've lost here at least. I feel like the Browns, Raiders, Rams, Titans, Cardinals, uh, Patriots, and the Seahawks are all games that could be 50-50 wins for this team. And that's a potential 7-game swing that I have for the Steelers. But I just feel like, I mean, first off, the rest of the division is already loaded, and I think it's just better offenses than what you have here with the Steelers. Just from the fact of quarterback play, and
Fair,
then
fair.
uh, you couple that with just like I think a lot of there's just like a lot of I guess middle of the pack ish teams that can be really good this upcoming season, or at least will be competing in every game they play this upcoming season. Like I said, the Patriots. I don't even think I had them doing all too great, but they're another one of those teams that with coaching they're going to be in every game, and I feel like the Steelers are similar in that manner of due to coaching and just I guess they still have talent on the team. They'll be in a lot of these games, but I just happen to have them losing them.
Yeah, and a lot of these, like we're trying to stay consistent with like divisions we covered, so that's probably the reason why. But
Mhm.
like looking at the Titans, like even with the addition of Hopkins, I think the Steelers are capable of winning
Mhm.
that game. I think they're capable of beating the Jaguars or the Rams. Like even though I'm super high in the Jaguars, they could even beat the Packers, the one team I feel like should lose every game. I had them. I had the Packers winning against the Steelers. Like
Mhm.
I could easily add like 2 or 3 games like to the predictions I've had, and not even to take into account where they might be able to put a bigger dogfight against the division foes. So there's just we don't know what's going to happen with the teams. I think
Yeah.
that's fair. Like they could like just like the Browns. I think their spread of the games like from like Florida stealing could be 6 to 12, like maybe five,
Mhm.
but like five is like the worst case scenario of like the receiving core gets decimated, like Najee
Mhm.
gets hurt and Pickett like struggles, and then like they lose TJ Watt again. I think the biggest swing here is like they have Cam Hayward and they still have TJ Watt
Mhm.
like leading that defense. And I think in a lot of these games, like it's gonna make the difference. It's gonna make the difference, and like compared to like lesser quarterback play. So they're absolutely well coached.
Mhm.
They could easily beat the Patriots, which I had here, of, like them losing to. But I think the combination of like how they're structured as a team keeps them in the ball game to win the games that we have them losing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like coaching matters in the NFL,
Mhm.
but with a specific roster, I noticed a lot of improvements, and I'm gonna tackle to the offense because
Mhm.
my dumb self can't get the order right. But
Yeah.
going to the offense, a lot of it stayed the same from last year. Like George Pickens
Mhm.
broke out. Like I expect him to um, put in a better season as well. And they still have Deontay Johnson. Like
Mhm.
great replacement for AB that they managed to find. Always been notoriously good at finding receivers through the draft.
Mhm.
Um, but you look at this roster, it's like another one of um, it's a great complementary roster that they built around the quarterback they've had, like
Mhm.
similar to what we discussed about the Titans. It's another like
Mhm.
Titans like team.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a big factor in them winning games this year is the development of a lot of these players on the team. It's a really young team, and I think that's what holds them back. Because I mean, we'd hope to see Kenny Pickett play a little bit better than he has in the past. I guess last season, and then Najee Harris, he was like I mean, he played better at the end of the season, but it's like I guess you'd want to see more of that consistently. And I know the offensive line was an issue last season, and I still think at best this offense, at least from what I've seen, this offensive line at best is probably like a middle of the pack offensive line, which it can do its job, but against
I'd
elite
agree.
defensive lines, I think that the run game could struggle quite a bit. Um, and yeah, I feel like Deontay Johnson, he's good, but I mean he has his issues. There's a reason why like he's still not talked about, even despite him being an elite route runner. There's still reasons why he's not talked about as being amongst some of the best receivers in the league, despite him still being a younger player. He's what, like 25 maybe? Like he's brilliant. I'm gonna quickly check on this.
Yeah,
He's
and while I was doing that, like there's a lot to like about the receiver. Like they just added Hakeem Butler, who's another one of the like Denzel Mims receivers to me, where
Mhm,
in like Arizona, I just felt like they didn't place him in the right role, and like he's just been miscast. He's coming from like I think the USFL, like he had a great season there, and I think this is just another like you're noticing a trend here. A lot of guys don't
mhm,
pan out within their rookie contract years, but then suddenly just like come out of the blue and become really good.
mhm,
So just from that perspective, and having Allen Robinson there for those guys is going to be huge.
mhm. Yeah, Deontay Johnson is 27 years old, which is still is slightly older, but still, you have arguably 4 years maybe of like of hit this type of play that he has right now until you probably start to see a fall off in his play. But still, it's like he's been known to be one of the better route runners in the NFL his whole career, but he still can't break, I guess, that threshold of being a bona fide elite wide receiver in today's NFL. And maybe quarterback play is partly to do with that, but um, yeah, I feel like elite receivers play good regardless of quarterback, and he isn't quite there. I think, yeah, again, George Pickens needs to have a big step up this upcoming season. He had a lot of highlight plays last year, but again, outside of those highlights, I felt like he was a bit inconsistent. That could be part of offensive play calling, but there's that. Allen Robinson, at this stage in his career, I'm leaning less towards him, returning to his elite form. I still think he can maybe put up a solid like 700-800 yard season at best. Um, but I feel like his best days are certainly behind him. Calvin Austin, I think, could be really good, and uh, yeah, and then like same with like the tight end room as well. You have Pat Fryermuth, Darnell Washington, who can be really good players. I mean, Pat Fryermuth, he played really well last season, in my opinion. But again, you're trying to see if these guys can step up to that next level, and I think that's what leads me to have such a low record for them. Where I think their floors maybe 5 wins, where their ceiling, where I said they have that 7 game swing, could be a 12 win season, which would be good, considering the fact that these guys could break out and kind of just take that next step in their NFL journey.
And yeah, realistically, they're probably somewhere in the middle of that.
Hmm.
Because they'll probably win games that we didn't think they could, or
Hmm.
they lose games where they shouldn't. Just a touch point. Like I think if Najee had a better offensive line, he could produce Jonathan Taylor like numbers. I really believe that. Like with the talent level he has. And with Calvin Austin, yeah, I there's a lot of problems with like Deontay Johnson. Like the biggest one that strikes out to me, like he struggles at the catch point with the fingertip type catches. Like he just loses concentration because like he's such an elusive route runner that like he's thinking about how to make the defender miss when he has the ball in his hands before the ball is actually in his hands.
Hmm.
So you think about that, and that's always going to catch lapses. But like it's just like an ingrained habit where you've seen him try to work at it. Like if you see receivers try to work at specific drills to improve like a concept like catching the ball with your fingertips,
Hmm.
which like I think Deontay Johnson did with tennis balls. Um, and that's a great idea. Like it's a great like guys that do that like typically develop professionally. So you hope for the
Hmm.
best with him, like where he improves in that technicality. But I think Calvin Austin was a better version of Wandale Robinson in that
Hmm.
draft class last year, where he you don't have to scheme him open. He can win one-on-one matchups. He has the quickness, just like Deontay Johnson, and the speed. So you take all those into account. I wouldn't be surprised if he's another like Khalil Shakir type player where he
Hmm.
could easily like break out with people like, who the heck is Calvin Austin? And
Hmm.
they haven't been watching him. Um, and like Hakeem Butler could easily play like that downfield threat, like on the
Hmm.
boundary that we were talking about with Denzel Mims. I can easily see that. Um, I'm still a little bit high on Robinson, like at least for
Hmm.
1 or 2 more years. I think he could still be a contributor. Like I think
Hmm.
the 700, 800 yards you said was fair. Um, I just think that Rams offense was just a mess last year. So like
Yeah.
we truly didn't see like what he could do, but it's
Hmm.
possible. Like the one thing Robinson thrives on is route running. So like with diminishing athletic ability, you can compensate with great
Hmm.
technical route running. So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of things. So like what the priorities are on offense for this team is
Hmm.
Najee Harris running the ball. Pat Byree probably is the 1A or 1B option to George Pickens, depending on how he develops. And then from there, it's just wide open.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, like, yeah, I guess Robinson could have more, but then I feel like it's again entirely dependent on how Pickett progresses this upcoming season. Because
Exactly.
in my head, I feel like from what I've seen and the type of player he like appears to be, I feel like he's going to have maybe like at best a 3,500 passing yard season, um, which I mean it isn't awful, for a young quarterback, but
Yeah.
again with all these mouths to feed, having 3,500 pass yards doesn't leave a lot of room for guys to break out as 1,000-yard receiving talents, and you maybe have room for one of those guys with a couple guys close to that, but I think yeah, Allen Robinson he'll be a really good complementary piece to this offense, but
Yeah.
I don't like. I think this team should hope he doesn't become the number one option, just with the idea of hopefully one of your guys that are younger than Robinson can actually step up and be a number one receiver and have him kind of just complement the offense as a consistent chain mover.
Yeah. And I think people forget like this offense was really good when Najee got going too.
Hmm.
So like if Kenny Pickett has 3,500 yards, maybe it's because like Najee Harris is running the heck out of the ball.
Hmm.
So um, it's really dependent on this offensive line this year. I think too. It's
Hmm.
like if Kenny Pickett is like a better version like than like pre Kirk Cousins like on the Washington like team before they changed their name.
Hmm.
Like I'd be happy with that coming in like that second year. Um, I wouldn't be happy if Mr. Trubisky starting. It's probably in the best situation for him being a backup, but
Hmm.
I'm a Bears fan. I'm traumatized.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to their defense. I think they're going to be leaning on their defense a lot
Hmm.
if they want to compete in the AFC in North for good reason.
Yeah.
Um, if you look at the team, they got a couple Patriots guys and Washington Commanders linebackers I like with Holcomb and Roberts to surround
Hmm.
what they have with T.J. Watt and Highsmith. I think it's a well-rounded linebacker group. And then from there, it's a mix of Minka and old talent with rookie sensations. And what do you think?
Yeah, I think this team has a lot of really good star talent. I think they can really, I guess, rely on this defense to help keep them in games. Because I feel like I don't know, like I think Minka Fitzpatrick is arguably the best safety currently in the NFL. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I feel like I mean you could argue I guess Derwin James being the other one. I think Justin Simmons is probably another one of the best ones, but I think just the dynamic playmaking ability of Fitzpatrick is probably, above that of Justin Simmons. And then I feel like Derwin James has kind of missed games in the past, which is my big issue with him. And whereas you've seen Fitzpatrick has like always been there basically. Like the second he got traded to the Steelers, he's literally been the guy basically. And then I think he just gets overshadowed pretty easy by TJ Watt, understandably so because TJ Watt might be the best pass rusher in the NFL right now. um, yeah, I feel like it's hard to argue that. Maybe there's the whole debate of him versus Miles Garrett, but
Or
um,
Nick Bosa, yeah.
yeah, but I feel like yeah, TJ Watt, in my opinion, is probably the best pass rusher in the league right now. You have solid defensive line with Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton, and Cameron Hayward. I think Benton's in a phenomenal spot right now with like his surrounding cast. I think it's a perfect opportunity for him to become a good player. Hopefully, he takes advantage of it. Patrick Peterson, I think, has amazed me in the fact that he's still able to play at a high level despite how old he is. And I guess, I mean, it goes to show that he isn't just a fast cornerback and he really is technically sound. And that's what's carried him throughout his career as a pro. and just be kind of like a model player. I think that any cornerback in the league can really look at towards being what does it take to be a superstar, I guess, cornerback throughout the entirety of your career. Kind of reminds me when they got Joe Hayden a little bit ago, like 5 years ago or something like that, where everyone thought he was washed, and then he signs with the Steelers and he played pretty solid. I mean, Peterson played well last year too, but I think that's good. Joey Porter here is kind of fun. I don't know where he was going to go. I thought it would have been fun if he got to the Steelers, and he ended up doing that. So it's pretty fun there.
Yeah, and I love Benton and Porter on this defense because I
Hmm.
think Brian Flores is still the defensive coordinator or senior
Hmm.
defensive assistant for this team. So you have him up there, and they're
Hmm.
just a really well-run defense. They've always been
Hmm.
like under Tomlin over the recent years after early struggles, and like their front 11 can get the job done as well.
Hmm.
Like every single team in the AFC North has a top 11 like starting unit that's good. That's
Hmm.
good, borderline great, or like elite.
Hmm.
Like there's no like bad defensive like options here. Like a lot of their starters is just like wow. Like how do you
Hmm.
get better than that? Like I think Ogunjobi's underrated. I think Hayward's still underrated, despite him making a Pro Bowl last year. I think,
Hmm.
and then you got T.J. Watt. Um, like TJ Watt and Minka, like they're always like top three discussion for safeties.
Hmm.
Like I don't care what order you have them, they're like the anchor points of that defense, and they've done a great job surrounding them. Like
Hmm.
this is how you build a defense or like a team around your stars.
Hmm.
Like they all do great things. Like Patrick Peterson can mention Joey Porter. Joey Porter's had amazing, the amazing college career. There's a reason why he was a first round selection. Then you have Levi Wallace, who was absolutely amazing on the Bills. I can't believe he's the third string on this team. He can be a starter on this team if Joey Porter like gets hurt or like slow to develop or like Patrick Peterson gets hurt or something like that,
Hmm.
or he's like getting older and like the speed is not there. Keanu Neal's like the nickel safety that they have. Then I love Corey Trice coming out of the draft as well. So they have a lot of they're deep in the quarterback now, and I don't think people expect. Then Marcus
Hmm.
Golden, great linebacker, great linebacker they got. Nick Kwiatkowski, he was amazing on the Bears like 2018, like 2019, those years, and he's their third string linebacker. It's like the depth on all these defenses is just insane, man.
Hmm. Yeah, I think just depth plus starting players is really good, and like even with like Larry Ogunjobi and Cameron Hayward, maybe they're not necessarily as good as like we have in our minds, but the fact that TJ Watt is there certainly elevates their play regardless, and the fact that they're already good in the first place, plus TJ Watt just basically demanding double and triple teams from offensive lines really allows these guys that are already pretty good to thrive in their positions and I guess showcase their elite talent in the first place just because offenses straight up just have to scheme for TJ Watt. um, yeah, it's like they honestly are so lucky to have a guy like TJ Watt on this team. He's like he could honestly have a better career than JJ Watt in terms of just like if he stays like his career trajectory at least right now, minus being robbed out of a couple defensive player of the year awards, is honestly just on par with JJ Watt. And I feel like people are almost quick to forget about how dominant of a player JJ was. And TJ, I mean, and I feel like everyone's kind of getting on that hype train with TJ Watt, despite I feel like him being a household name for NFL fans in the first place.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I like a lot of people are just like thinking about Micah or Nick Bosa a lot last season. That was like the major discussion. Who's going to be the
Hmm.
defensive player of the year? And like it's just like what about TJ Watt? What about Miles
Hmm.
Garrett? Like I feel like that
Hmm.
pass rushing just gets overlooked because of the quarterback play in the AFC right now. And
Hmm.
I I look at like them just signing Alex Highsmith as an up and coming edge rusher opposite
Hmm.
him. And I think they're in a great spot. And like if they want to introduce stunts or like rush one, drop the other, kind of deal, or
Hmm.
like just blitz them both. They can do play different mind games now because it's a well-rounded defense. It
Hmm.
took a while, it took a couple years, but this defense like I don't see any noticeable gaps where I'm just like, I wonder why they picked this guy. Like, he's the
Hmm.
weakness on the defense. I'm going to target. I don't see that on this roster.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, this might be, in my opinion, the toughest division we covered on the series.
Hmm.
Because any of these teams could make the playoffs,
Yeah.
like, but they have serious consideration. Like every division we covered, there's like at least like one or two where it was just like, yeah, they're finishing like 6 wins or below. But
Hmm.
like this one, we didn't have a situation like where we confidently were like, yeah, this team is gonna have be picking in the top 10.
Hmm.
Like very tough. Like I wouldn't be like surprised if the Steelers finish second in the division.
Yeah.
It's just a very cutthroat, exciting division. I'll be watching this closely
Hmm.
throughout the season.
Yeah, because I mean, like theoretically, let's say the Ravens don't have these kind of like another down year next upcoming season. Let's say Deshaun Watson isn't as great as advertised, and all of a sudden the Steelers are in that perfect position to strike for that number 2 spot in this division. And um, yeah, it's like I mean I gave the Steelers a bad record, but again, if it's almost like the Commanders for me, whereas I feel worse for the Commanders, but I feel like these teams have a technically better roster than what the record is, and so I think this is just another exciting team to kind of see how they pan out this upcoming season.
And after all, like our win loss records are obviously just where we think the talent of the roster is. Coaching is like a massive factor that
Hmm.
we don't go into as much. Well, we're just looking at like what the players can do, like as versatile and like as skill wise. So any given Sunday, it can happen any given Sunday. There's a lot of like Sunday to Thursday games that happen where like teams aren't in like the physically shaped position that they ideally like because of scheduling. But there's always like games like that where it's going to have an effect on the outcomes and win loss. Um, so while we do have our records as our records, there we do understand where like teams could fall short or exceed them easily. Um, with that, that wraps up 7 divisions. We are almost done. We are going to be
Hmm.
covering the NFC North next week. I'm pretty excited about talking about this division as well.
Yeah, we're gonna talk
If
about
you're
how the
not caught
Bears
up
suck,
and want
right?
to know when it, oh yeah, yeah, I'm preparing for an 0-17 season, even though we got DJ Moore. I'll be really excited to talk about where the Lions are, the Bears are, the wild card Packers. Like that will be a fun one to see where we stand on that. Um, but want to get some more updates from us, where you can find us, follow the Instagram handle in the banner below. Um, also, leave a like, comment, subscribe if you're on the YouTube, if you're on Spotify. Hey, tell a friend, share it with a friend, tell that friend to share it with another friend. You know where to find us. We love to bring in more content to look upon how we can improve. Um, yeah, we've been on the minute 40 pretty much with every episode. It won't always be like this. We like to go in depth with the summer teams, but with that, take it easy. We look forward to hearing from you. See you next week.
Peace out.